And what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Designated Players and MLS podcast. Yep, it's time for more not so deep dives. And we are back with a collab that is literally years in the making. It's Mattey Casey from Royal Riot. How are you doing?
I am just pinching myself to be hearing your voice and looking at you at the same time instead of listening to the podcast in my iPhones all the
Man, I am so thrilled. And I
time.
know Connor is kicking himself because he can't be here. We've talked about this for months. Like we could not wait to get him on. And then he hit me up. He's like, I'm not gonna be able to make any of them. I'm like, dude, life sucks, but I'm rolling through with it. So super happy to have you here. Really excited to get going here. I know we have a lot to talk about, but before we do that, of course, it's scarf of the week time. We can't not talk scarves. So what do you got for us today?
Because it's you, I got one that folds and meets in the middle to make you
Yes,
upsell crest.
elite.
How could I not wear that on
That
this
is
podcast?
that might be the greatest. I've seen a lot of really good ones so far. That might be the best of the best. I think that one wins. Do I
Oh, I
have?
have that scarf. That
Yeah,
one
I
that
would say I don't think this one does. I love the design on the back. I like the emblem kind of all over the place. But
Yep.
like I said, it has to lose some points because it doesn't meet in the front. So, um, you know, and I also don't love. Ooh, hello.
There's my second scarf.
Yeah.
Since we
Fair.
were talking before we came on that the first time we chatted was 3 years ago about the RSL Duck, I had to bring out the pixelated Nintendo Duck Hunt
Yeah.
scarf that RSL made after we won that game.
So good. So good.
And then lastly, this is the one I usually wear to games.
I like it. I
The
like it a
Believe
lot.
scarf with Brandon Steinekert. He wrote our anthem. If you haven't heard it, go type in RSL Believe on YouTube. Do yourself a favor. And also
Yeah.
don't live under a rock. How do you not know the best anthem in all of soccer?
The only one that I've got is Bulls on Parade in on repeat. So,
That's a
you
good
know.
one. I'll give
Oh,
you that.
yeah. Well, listen, it has been, from an outsider's point of view, this has been an extremely confusing offseason in RSL land. Offloading a lot of talent, it
Mhm.
not bringing too much in so far. We are recording this on the 4th of February, so there's plenty of time to fix that. But this comes after a third place finish in the West, and it felt like they were one piece away from making the final push. And, that third place finish, it did lead to an early exit in the playoffs, two PK shootouts at the hand of Minnesota. They did lose in the round of 32 in the U.S. Open Cup to a USL Championship side, and they didn't get out of the group in the Leagues Cup. So a very weird sort of season in 24. But Pablo Mastroeni remains in charge once again in 2025, and he's looking to increase his knockout tournament success and capitalize on the regular season dominance that he had. The RSL is going to be in obviously MLS, of course, with the playoffs, Champions Cup, and Leagues Cup. I want to just get your thoughts 2024, what are you feeling about it? Good, bad, indifferent?
First of all, I know it seems like we've lost a lot of players, but if you look at them on a case by case basis, we'll start with Gavin Beavers in net. He was our backup goalie. He got a chance to get minutes. Everybody sees this kid's got massive potential, massive upside, but maybe wasn't quite ready to lead RSL. I want to say on that topic, even with all of our success last year, if you went back, we changed our back line. It seemed game by game, sometimes intra game. One of the games I went to, one of the clips I sent you was from the Chicago game. We literally traded for a guy from Columbus. He flew to Chicago, watched some video on the iPad, and we played him the next day because we just didn't have anybody on our back line. So I don't want to make it sound like Gavin didn't have a great year, that Zach McMath didn't have a great year. There was a lot of fluctuation on our back four. But, Gavin goes to Brondby. When a kid has a chance to go to Europe and he wants to go, I think the team is right to sell him. And he wasn't, necessarily coming into camp as the number one starter. So sell him and move on. They did. I got no problem with it. Matt Crooks, for a long part of the year last year, I was alone on a mountain where I just thought he was one of the most important players that we had. He played as a 10, he was a connector. He didn't get a lot of goals, he didn't get a lot of assists. But by the end of the season, after I harped on him every single week, eventually my co host agreed with me that if you're watching him, Hayden, I'm talking about, Hayden Nielsen, of course,
Yep.
if you're watching him, he was the one that was going back and getting the ball when we lost. He was repressing, he was making runs where he was pulling multiple defenders away to create space for the other attackers, knowing that he wasn't going to get an assist, but he did it multiple times per game anyway. He just didn't care about himself, only the team, which is just a perfect explanation of a Real Salt Lake player. I wish he would have stayed, but the bottom line is, he's got a young family and he wanted to be in England, and you can't blame him for that. He wanted to go back to England. The team said, absolutely, let's make it happen. And they did. The other two players that we lost, Anderson Julio, obviously, I'm a huge fan of. I miss him. He was our spark plug off the bench. We had him back in 18, and then we sold him. It didn't go so great. We got him back. I absolutely love this guy, but we got somebody similar in Elias Manuel. I don't know if you're familiar with this player. He
Yeah.
plays for the New Jersey Red Bulls, or he did. Yeah, you knew that was coming. I am
Yeah,
excited.
I know.
So we get a similar player at a much lower salary point. I'm sure Dallas is thrilled that they're not going to have Julio scoring on them anymore, because he always seemed to light those guys up. And then of course, so that one is the only one that was like a business transaction.
Hmm.
Then the fourth loss was obviously Chicho. Everybody knows, he had that suspension, and then he came back. He didn't really score that many goals, and kind of maybe pulled our offense apart a little bit at the end, because everybody was constantly trying to feed him and he wasn't always in the best position. And I'm not knocking him as a player, as a person. I don't know what the truth to the allegations is, because I'm not omnipotent,
Sure.
but he had to move and he did. So we lose those four players, but we've, like I said, we brought in a like for like on Julio. We brought in two great goalies. Cabral sounds like he's going to be our starter, since Zach McMathis had to go under the knife, unfortunately. That's not the guillotine. He had to have surgery. Then we brought in another goalie, the backup goalie for Orlando, Mason Slidahar, who I hear great things about.
Hmm.
I told you, we were talking before we recorded. I used to live down in Southwest Florida. I knew a ton of Orlando games. Immediately was texting guys like, hey, what do you think of this guy? And everybody said kind of the same thing. He's really aggressive. He's a good shot stopper and solid whenever Galese was on leave, but he was never going to surpass Galese. So that's a
Sure.
great get for us.
Yeah.
And you're talking about somebody with yards of courage, who's dealt with so much adversity in his life, having cancer. He had
Right.
Ewing sarcoma and was training while he was getting treatment. I mean, the guy's just a baller. I can't wait to see him. So we bring those guys in. We can't forget that last summer we had a huge window. We brought in Diogo Gonçalves from Copenhagen for 3 million. He's going to be our 10 this year. And he was, rotating into Tree's position last year anyway. So he's going to be our 10 this year. Dominic Marchuk, before you ask me who my breakout star of the year is going to be, it's Dominic Marchuk. Okay. We brought him in on the right wing. He was clearly head and shoulders technically above some of the players that were around him last year. But the thing that I noticed, because I was lucky enough to be out in Utah last fall going through all those practices, he came in and he immediately clicked and understood the assignment. He played the position a little differently than Andres Gomez. He likes to be chalk on the boots. He's always on the line, and that kind of pulls the right back out of position a little bit with their passing. And I talked to Paulo about that after his first match, actually. But scored a beauty against Portugal for Poland. He was the Polish League's Young Player of the Year 2 years ago, and I think he's going to be the 2025 MLS Young Player of the Year.
Ooh.
I'm telling you, when you see this guy, he's going to go off this year. He is an absolute baller. I cannot wait to see it. And we brought other guys in too. We had Lachlan Brook that we brought over from Australia last year. He'll probably see some minutes with Diego Luna, unfortunately having that nose fracture.
Hmm.
We'll see Lachlan Brook over there on the left. We brought in Tyler Wolf from Atlanta, eldest son of Josh. So obviously had amazing coaching growing up. Forster Ayago is a guy who went under the radar. And when we were on with SoccerWise, they didn't actually even mention him when they were talking about the players that RSL has brought in. He's someone that we signed in the re-entry draft. He was a Nashville player and they let him go. We took him. From everything I'm hearing in camp, he could be our day one starter at the 9. Big, physically imposing striker, links well, seems to share a soccer wavelength with Diogo Gonçalves, and also can get on a cross from Marchuk. So hearing lots of amazing things about him. We've got depth now along our back line, which we obviously didn't have last year. We got Sam Jonkwa in the Julio trade. We've got Elias. We talked about we drafted a billion people, but one of the guys that I am most excited about for incomings for any U.S. youth national team players or fans out there, Kobe Henry. Okay, he's an 04. He was basically on the same path with Diego Luna, and I watched those guys play together actually at IMG, or the same time frame if they weren't on the same exact teams at the same time. But 6'2" center back. When he was 17, he joined the USL. So instead of going into an MLS academy or going to college, he went USL, and then from USL, he was their biggest transfer when they sold him to France. And at the time, it was like $700,000 was like their record-setting transfer. And when that happened, I remember talking to the guys at the RSL front office, like, "Hey, man, if we don't figure something out with the Monarchs, all the kids are going to start doing this."
Mm-hmm.
Because if we don't figure out a way to bring our players through, people are going to see USL as a valid pathway. Unfortunately for Kobe, he went to France, he ended up on loan, then he got loaned somewhere else. Minutes were hard to come by. Comes back to MLS, now that we've got Mauricio Pochettino, and gun to my head, the only reason I can think that he would come is because he wants to play in the 2026 World Cup and he wants to get some minutes. And this is going to be the first time that I can remember that our center backs are going to have a young stud behind them, pushing them for their spot.
Very,
And
very interesting.
yeah, he's not going to be starter day one. We'll have Brian
Sure.
Barrett, we'll have Jay Glad, but I promise you, Kobe wants one of their jobs.
Yeah,
And
as you should, right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's going to make all three of them better. And I'm super excited about it.
Yeah, and yeah, that's like I said, it's always been Glad plus insert player here, but there was never the next, who's next up.
Yeah, who's the next guy? It
Yeah.
was always a guy from the Monarchs or a guy that like came through our academy, like Eric Holt, who I loved.
Hmm.
Zach Farnsworth, who's still on our roster, but he's always hurt. Now we've got legitimately, if Jay Glad, should get a red card or something like that, Kobe Henry steps in.
Should
I'm
be
not
okay.
fussed. Yeah.
Yeah. Man, well, you listed basically every move, which was great because now everybody's got an idea of what you've done. But I don't know if you've kind of were hinting at a few of them, but give me your best of the best. Like if you had to pick one that you were thrilled with. I know you were talking big up on Kobe Henry. Is he your best addition? Do you think there's going to be any more?
Of what we did in the offseason,
Hmm.
Kobe's the one I'm most excited about
Great.
so far. But we are still working. Kurt Schmidt, who's our technical director, sporting director, whatever vocabulary we choose to use this week.
Chief soccer officer.
Sure, why not? Told everybody at media days we're looking at bringing in another striker or a winger, but what I'm hearing is striker. If not before the Herediano match, which is our first Club World Cup, then before, or Champions Cup rather.
Hmm.
If he's not here before that, then we should have him for the first week when we open the season. So I don't know who it's going to be. I heard some names that were very exciting. I immediately, massively overreacted because it was the same day that Doyle came out with his prediction that we were going to finish ninth. And I'm like, what are you talking about? We're winning the league, dude. You know that we're getting either A or B, and of course we might not get A or B. Everything's got to be the Cam Tam asset dance, which is now complicated with internal transfer money.
Yeah.
But if we get either of the two names I heard, I mean, I've got no fear.
Love it. I love it. That's always exciting to have that there. I mean, like I said, I wasn't thrilled with the off season. I think a lot of the moves they made were okay. I mean, and I think there's a lot of potential there. But when I look at like what's gonna make the biggest impact right now, I didn't really see somebody who jumped out because they did a lot of that work in the winter, right? A lot of that stuff was done already. So when we look about just this off season, I put Elias Manuel down there, a player who I have enough familiarity with, but he does have the physical attributes, and we talked about this before we even got on here, right? He's got the physical attributes to be successful, but it did always feel like he missing the finishing touch. Now, I will say that definitely is because of the Red Bull shadow. Like any striker is not good enough for Red Bull because we've had so many bad ones. Anytime you miss something, it's like, oh, here we go again, right? And I caught myself doing that because I checked his stats. I was like, 8 goals or something last year, and I think only one penalty. Like he scored goals last year relatively well. But he was coming off the bench a lot for us, and it was his best year in the U.S. last year. And maybe he finds another level. I still don't see him as a 15 goal guy, right? I don't see that. Your comment on Forster, Ajago, is it pronounced Ajago?
I said a Yago, but
Iago. Okay. Whichever way it is, when
yeah,
he went to Nashville, I was excited because I was like, "Ooh, this might be the Sam Surridge second guy, and maybe even Hani Mukhtar's like, somebody can take the load off of Hani Mukhtar." And he just never got a chance. But I watched his tape and I was like, "Man, this guy's got something about him." So if I had to switch it out, he may be another one that I'm curious to watch because I think he was really, really solid, and it's going to be really good. But after all of those moves you obviously lost a good bit too, and you mentioned a lot of them as well. Who would you think is probably going to be the hardest person to replace, the person you'll miss the most?
I'm gonna say Julio, just
Hmm.
because it's really tough to explain how difficult what he made it for people when he came on in the 65th minute and was just bursting with energy. And the man just sprinted nonstop.
Hmm.
Every second he was on the pitch, he pressured every back pass. Every time the goalie had the ball at his feet, he wasn't like running down performatively so that he didn't have to track back on defense. He was sprinting like he was going for the finish line. And every year he would get at least one or two goals that way. Besides the bangers that the dude could score, he's massively underrated in the air. For a shorter player, he's got incredible hops and would just score headers every year that people would be like, how did the shortest guy just get that? Well, if you ever got to watch him up close, I mean, the guy's basically a muscle. I remember the first time we got to really watch him close up was in Kansas City. We are at an away game, and players were literally bouncing off of him while he had the ball because he's
He's
incredibly solid.
big.
Yeah.
uh,
Tree is someone that the community will miss. I mean, the guy, or Matt Crooks, I should say, if you're not
mhm.
a massive fan, was involved in so many charities in Salt Lake. He won our Humanitarian of the Year award last year. And when I interviewed him before the game where they were going to present him the plaque and the trophy and everything, I said, "Hey, I got to write an article about this. Can you please just list off the charities and the organizations that you work with?" And it was like 8 of them. And then he literally was like, "Oh, I'm also trying to set up this refugee team, but the pieces aren't in place yet." And I'm like, "Dude, do you even sleep?"
I was
When
saying, like, don't you know you're supposed to play soccer too, like on the outside of this?
Just an incredible person. Like I said, enough things can't be said. He went to Bradford. No, Hull City. He went to Hull City, and
Hmm.
I watched the first game he got to start. He immediately scored in like the fourth minute, and I'm just so happy for him. Just an incredible person in the locker room too.
Man, and that's the stuff you don't see. Like when you're a non-follower of the team, right? And that's the reason we do these because people who just look at stats are like, okay, Matt Crooks, he was okay. Like they're not gonna miss him that bad, right? But that impact outside of the four lines on the pitch and that impact that you have in the community and what it means to be a part of RSL, that's the stuff that most people don't know about, right? And the stuff that you want to bring in and be a part of your team. So I really love that story. That was really good.
100%. And then
Yeah.
Gavin, he's an academy guy. He's been in our
Hmm.
setup for so long. I wish him nothing but the best, and I
Yeah.
hope he's really successful over there. Chicho, man, I hope he finds his form again.
Yeah.
So it's tough to understate how kind he was to me when I was there as a journalist, and he was actually my first Spanish interview.
Oh yeah.
Yes. I'll send you the tape. I never posted it, but I'll send you the tape of me using Colombian slang to break the ice when I first met. And he's always so stoic in interview.
Right.
Like literally, he's just laughing at me for like 30 seconds. And the next day when I saw him in practice, and I'm like, "Hey, senor, how you doing?" He's like, "No, no, 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 manos, we manos. Like we're brothers now."
Yes.
Nice guy. I hope he does well in San Jose, not against us, of course.
Yeah, yeah, be really good for 32 games. That's all I need. Yeah, listen, I wanted to go with Beavers here, right? I think I saw him as being the next guy up. I've never like once McMath left, I think it was Colorado this time. Like he was okay in Colorado and he was okay at RSL too. Like I think he had his good moments and his bad moments, but I never saw him as a long-term. I mean, let's be honest. There is no long-term Nick Romano replacement. You never will, and there never will be ever. But I didn't love that replacement there. So, you've got another couple of GK, and we're gonna talk about those a little bit. The Cabral and now Sedushar
Reinhardt. Yep.
pronunciation. Yes. But I always thought like he would have been the next like closest thing you could get to Ramondo. He like the come through the academy, and I know Ramondo was traded from DC, but come through the academy, be there for 7, 8, 9 years, and really just be the rock. So I think that one hurt.
I think it's like for New Jersey Red Bulls, you're never going to have another forward like Juan Pablo Angel. So,
Yeah,
you're always going to be held to that standard. But don't forget, it was supposed to be David Ochoa,
it was.
and then he had his whole thing,
Yeah,
which has unfortunately just continued, you know.
yeah,
I thought Gavin could be that guy, but he always wanted to go to Europe,
yep,
and you can't fault somebody for, following their dreams to me. Like I know there are fans out there, and I never try to tell people how to fan, like be a fan however you want to be a fan.
yep,
But I know people that are like, "Oh, you want to go to Europe? Then screw you." And I'm like, dude,
yeah,
you have any idea the self-belief you have to be a professional soccer player in the first place?
yeah,
How every single person you've met in your entire life tells you that's never going to work, and you believe in yourself enough to keep trying
yeah.
and make it happen. Shoot for the moon, man.
Good for you. Yeah. And it's also a credit to the front office at RSL, right? They very easily could have said, hey, man, you're a homegrown guy. We want you to be here for 7, 8, 9 years. We don't really care. We're going to turn away every offer, right? I mean, they have every right to do that. And then, until he's like, okay, I'm not going to sign a new contract. Then he moves on a free. But, they have every right to be like, listen, we're going to do what's best for the team instead of best for you. And they were like, nope, if you want to do this, you're one of our own. You come through our academy. It's such a I'm going to use like it's a gold star on the front office, man, for being. And again, for Matt Crooks too. You told that whole story. It's like good people get rewarded with good things. So it's such a good look on the front office for standing by their players.
And they consistently do that. So to the RSL fans out there who might be nervous and who are looking at our front office and like, well, why don't you sign this guy? Why don't you sign that guy? What about this player, that player? Just remember, this is the front office and the ownership group that keep setting records for incoming transfers, right? They set a transfer when they bought Andres Gomez. Then they immediately broke it with Chicho. They bought Gomez for around 3.75 million, we think,
Yeah.
reported. Every time I
Right.
say a number to a technical director or something, like I'll never forget Lutz Pfannenstiel, like in front of a crowd of people. I mentioned a number that had been reported for Nico Gioacchini. He's like, no, we got more than that. I'm like, dude, you got a microphone. Tell us how much you got.
Yes. Yeah.
But you won't,
Be transparent.
but you won't do that, will you? But I didn't say that because
Right.
I wanted to keep my job. But we bought them for around 3.75. We sell them for 11 to 13 million. Anyone is going to make that transaction, but you also have to understand how much it helps when you're trying to convince somebody like Dominic Marchuk to come to RSL or somebody like Diogo Gonçalves. When you say, look, you come here, you put in the work, we will help you develop and perform. And then when we get an offer, we will let you move on. We're
Right.
not going to keep you here when you don't want to be here.
Well, and
And
another
sorry, I had some Portland in my throat.
another big one, right? And stuff that goes overlooked. They did the same with Fidel Barajas, right?
Yes.
Dude got brought in for less than $1 million. They flipped him for like 800% profit in 4 months. It's
I
like,
think
and
it was around 250K.
yeah, and yeah, that's right. They flipped him for 4, right? So it was
Yeah,
like,
four
yeah,
and a half.
1600% profit. Like, so they benefit on their financial end, but also if Barajas really wanted to go to Liga MX, which would make sense, on you
Sure.
go, mate. Have a good one, right? Like, good for them.
And we've done it before with Savarino and Julio,
Yeah,
where they go somewhere. I mean, less so with Savarino. He did win about 1 billion cups in Brazil.
yeah,
But when it's not working out over there, come back to us. And I feel like as a front office, like our guys, our ownership group, they understand that these are people with families and their own hopes and dreams. And as long as you're giving us everything while you're here, when the time comes that you want to go, let's figure out a way that makes sense for everybody.
yeah. 100%. Very, very good from them. So listen, we're talking about all these players moving around, in, out, what have you. is and I'm setting this up like you didn't just go on an entire rant for him, but give me just a little bit more so I can at least like put it in the section here on the YouTube video. Tell me more about your breakout player, and I'm gonna pretend you didn't tell me about it before, so I'm gonna get my surprise face ready.
Okay. Dominic Marchuk, I think he's going to be he was the young player of the year in the Polish league the year before we brought him in, which we brought him in last summer. I think he's going to be the 2025 MLS young player of the year. I think Diego Luna is just going to hand him the trophy.
I love it.
This kid's electric. He's technically gifted on the ball. He does something that I love. It's something that I saw him doing, and then the fun part is towards the end of the season, I started seeing Diego Luna doing it. Is when he goes to shoot, he's as soon as he brings his foot back and the defender gets down
Mhm.
in position, he moves it about 6 inches, and then he takes his shot. And Diego did that against San Jose, which was the second clip that I texted you earlier today.
Yep.
But Marchuk does it every single time. It's how he scored the goal against Portland, which is what you're going to find when you look up Dominic Marchuk goal against Portugal. For some reason, the Portland goal always comes up first, but they're very similar goals. And he's just technically exquisite. I love watching the kid play. He's super nice. Such a nice young man. He's going to blow it up, and everyone in the league's going to be like, Andres Gomez, who?
Yeah. Well, and you know, it was funny when I started looking at mine, I was like, okay, who is going to be the next Andres Gomez? Because that's exactly what Andres Gomez did. He came in and nobody expected a lot out of him. I think there were okay, he's a U22 guy, like we need to see him perform, but nobody expected him to hit that level. And I'm like, okay, who's gonna do that? And my thought was like, I wanted to go even lower because I think Moranchuk, not Moranchuk, that's Atlanta.
Marchuk.
Marchuk. Okay, I get that pronunciation messed up all the time. Marchuk, I think, had that expectation coming in, and like you said, is going to blow well past it again. But I'm also interested in somebody else you mentioned was Lachlan Brook, an Australian player, right? Came way again midway through the year,
Mhm.
hasn't played a ton yet, but because there are so many holes to fill and you don't really know which ones are going to work out, I'd be curious to see if he can make a step, maybe not as an out and out starter, but as a guy who's maybe first off the bench, right? Luna needs a break, or Marchuk needs a break. Who's the first guy you're going to look at? Maybe it's Lachlan Brook.
And also the thing with RSL, for whatever reason, the front part of our schedule always seems to be Wednesday, Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday, Wednesday, Saturday.
Yeah,
When they're coming like that, everybody's going to get a chance. And Mastroeni's thing has always been, if you're showing it to me, you will get your chance. And he's proven that he's going to do it. A guy that I'm super excited to see this year that we haven't talked about, and I should say we brought in one other player, Ari Heol from Australia,
that's
as a
right.
striker, brought him in. But somebody that we brought in last year, actually, he was at the Chicago game. We brought him up through our academy and our youth system that I'm excited to see this year is Xavier Gozo. I thought we would get to see a little more of him last year, but then, Luna turned out to be a stud.
Yeah.
So, nobody could have predicted that, right?
Yeah.
I've only been screaming about him for 6 years.
Yeah. So, a couple things. First off, I was opening some of those MLS packs that I bought, which I am now fully addicted to, and I need to like control myself because they will be my new scarves. I would just buy them all, which is terrible. So I'm gonna try not to do that, but I opened it and I was reading all of them, and I was like, okay, yeah, this player, and I got to Xavier Gozo. I'm like, I don't know who this is. Like
Yeah.
I did not know who that was. That was the only player I didn't know. And then I did some research. I'm like, okay, yeah, he hasn't played much, but be cool to see what he could do. Arieth Piol, I
Hmm.
was like, all right, this is a 20-year-old guy from the Australian league, like whatever, right? Then I watched his highlight tape. I was like, holy crap, this dude's gonna be a baller. He's gonna be insane.
And they said like on his day, like it might not be there every day consistently, but they're like when he's hot, he just doesn't miss. Like he
Yeah,
just has these practice sessions where he's scoring 20, 30 goals where he just doesn't ever miss.
I am so excited because I don't know what he's going to do this year, how important, but like give him a year, like almost like the Andres Gomez thing, like give him a year to get comfortable, bro. This dude could be like legit, and I'm excited for it.
And again, like not telling people how to fan, but I will without bringing up receipts because I think that's rude and
Uh-huh.
disrespectful. Like have a take. I'm not going to scorch you about it years later.
Right.
But there were people at the end of 2 years ago, at the end of 23, that were all up in Andres Gomez is a bust. The scouting office needs to be completely revamped. And I'm going, hold on a second. Dude had 5 or 6 assists in half a season, 4 or 5 of them. If he scored 5, then 4 of them. If he scored 6, then 5 of them were game winners.
Hmm.
When the game's on the line, this guy's going to give you something. I said, give him a chance. We got him in the summer. Like, let's see what he does with a full off season. That's like the Pablo Mastroeni tattooed on his forehead. Give them a full off season. He just
Yeah.
says it all the time. And I think that's going to be Dominic this year. And it could be Lockie too, like you said.
Dude,
You know, but
it's the David Goss theorem, right? You
yep,
can't judge somebody off of a back half of a season. You have to give them the full year and see what they can do. And we're actually, when we do our prediction episode, you may have given me the answer here, because we're going to do the David Goss theorem player of the year. Who is going to be the guy who came in midway through last year and is going to ball out in 2025? And that may be the answer. So
I mean, if you pick it, I'll split the winnings with you.
yeah, I will. I'll make Connor pay us something. Well, listen, we're
Down
we're
easy,
we're
but
yeah, we're down here looking at 2025, and there are a lot of things that are still kind of in the works, still moving. But what's the one question you still got for this team?
just who's the striker? If and we're not going to know until we see the first couple games, right? But I know who everybody else is. We returned, I think, 9 of our starters basically. I want to know who the striker is. I'm not asking where the goals are coming from because that's what everyone else asks. I just want to know who the striker is going to be so I can watch how they interact with the guys around them.
Mhm.
I'm perfectly happy scoring by committee.
Yeah.
And one of the things, like I think we were talking about before we started recording, forgive me if I'm repeating myself here, but when Chicho was struggling last year, everybody was trying to feed him the ball every time.
Mhm.
And it got frustrating to me when I was watching from above, going, that, look, Luna's open. Look, Dominic's open. Look, Brooks is open. Like, pick the right pass, not the
Mhm.
right player.
Right.
So if you tell me that we're going to have committee, okay, cool. I just want to know who's gonna be in that spot.
Yeah, mine's very, very similar. It's what does the attack look like? Lots of unproven talent and players who came halfway through the year, right? David Goss theorem reborn, right? You got all of those players and Diego Luna, right? So is Goncalves going to step up to the plate as a big name DP? Is Manuel going to be the 9 to lead the group, right? One of the questions you were talking about, is Marschuk going to be the next Andres Gomez? Like, there's a lot of unknowns, and if any of those are no's, who's next, right? And that's kind of where this whole, like, what is this going to look like?
And we've talked about one of the things that RSL had a hard time with last year and the year before even was breaking down teams in a low block, and we saw it against Minnesota. And one of the things that they've been working on this year is changing to a 5-man back line where Emeka and Ellie is in right back
Mm-hmm.
in defense. But then when we transition to offense, you'll start to see him, instead of making the overlapping run that Katranis makes on the left and that we're used to seeing, every right back in the world do, in what Emeka calls this an underlapping run,
Yeah.
where he actually folds in and becomes another pivot, and then one of the two pivots gets to move forward into more of an offensive role. We also didn't talk, so that'll be interesting. I'm looking forward to see that,
Mm-hmm.
because honestly, I got tired of explaining to people last year that yes, we defend with 4, but if you watch, we attack with 3. As soon as we have the ball, Katranis is bombing down the left.
Yep.
So we're not really a 4-4-2, are we? Or a 4-2-3-2. I get annoyed with the people who just talk about the numbers all the time. Like,
Yes.
look at what we're actually doing and where the players are in various game phases. That's a little more interesting for me. But we're also getting back someone who's been injured, and I don't want to have RSL Nation come after me for saying it's like getting a new signing when you bring somebody back from injury. But we are getting Pablo Ruiz back,
Oh my
who
God, that's
was,
right.
yeah, and see that face. Everybody forgets about him.
Dude, we
So
we did a top 5 position draft, and he was like number 2 off the board in the center mid role. Like, he was legit.
absolutely. And everybody forgot about him because he was
Yeah.
hurt 2 years ago. And when he got hurt in the summer, our season tanked. Last year, he got hurt like 3 or 4 games in, and everybody's like, oh man, here it goes. But then we got Katranis, and they moved Emeka and Nelly into that second holding spot. and he was just supposed to be there temporarily.
Right. I
Well,
remember
first of all,
this.
Catranas is an absolute baller, so, and really underrated as a left back. I
Mhm.
challenge anybody to name me 4 better left backs in the league. You can't. He
Mhm.
should be an all-star. Emeka Anelli stepped into that pivot next to Ojeda and took Nelson Palacios' job. Nelson Palacio
The
was supposed to be the stud
U22.
last year, and he couldn't get on the field because Emeka just took his spot. So Emeka's someone else. Like, we could have 5 or 6 all-stars next year. And I'm serious. Luna, Marchuk, Emeka Anelli, and Alex Catranas, not to mention Jay Glad. So that's 5 right there.
Man, you are making this next section really tough for me, but we're here for predictions, and you are building quite the case. But I'll send it to you first. Where is this team finishing? You have got me thinking.
So I know everybody's saying we're not going to make the playoffs. I think we are going to make the playoffs. I think we're going to be in the 4 or 5 range, and a
Okay.
lot of that is going to depend. We get one of the names that I'm hearing about, and I'll change my answer and say that we're going to finish better than we did last year.
Wow. Okay.
If I mean, imagine if I told you RSL, the team that you have right now, RSL has a guy who's going to score 15 goals.
It's over.
Then we're finishing 1, 2, or 3, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So if we do that, then I say 1, 2, or 3. But for the sake of not having someone, call the guys in white coats to commit me, I'll say realistically, I absolutely see us. First of all, absolutely, we're going to make the playoffs.
Mhm.
Defense wins cups. So I think we're going to be in contention. I can't say enough again about how the front office has strengthened our back line. And Cabral, like, is supposedly amazing with his feet, right?
Mhm.
Brazilian. So you take away some of the silly goals that we gave up last year, and we finished even better than we did, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we dropped points. So I have no problem seeing us in that 4 or 5 range or even better. And where I want to see us is seriously contending for silverware.
All right. Admission time. When I started this, my prep, I had them barely pushing for the play-in game. I had them between 7 and like 11. And now everything that we've talked about, I don't know if I could put them top 4 because I've got teams that I've kind of penciled in there already.
Sure.
Now, if you have this move, and again, this is a terrible part about doing the Champions Cup teams first
Right.
because we have to get them out of the way early, and then there's so much transfer window left. It's like, okay, great. Um, I have moved them up to between 5 and 7. I don't have them in the play-in game anymore, but I also don't have them in the top 4. Now, obviously, the reason that we do all of this, so we get the prep, and then we get to the day before the season starts, and that's when we put our predictions out. So I have 2.5, 3 weeks to get that player in and for me to make that change. But right now, on the 4th of February at 10:48 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I've got them at between 5 and 7,
Well, the window's open until April 23rd.
which is
So
crazy.
it really is. It really bothers me how the windows, as long as you have RSL winning their first round in the playoffs and then still playing well and hopefully going further, I don't care what number you put us in,
Yeah,
because the last thing you want to do is invite RSL to the dance,
that's
right?
right.
We proved it in 09. Doesn't matter where we get. I thought the Red Bulls were going to double up our accomplishment by being the last team in and then winning the cup, but not beating LA isn't for everybody, you know?
No, no, it's not, unfortunately. But
I'm so sorry.
no, it's good because listen, Western and Eastern Conference, right? I think we're
Yeah.
the only two, is that right? To
Well,
win both?
RS, yes, you are correct.
Yeah. Go team, right?
So we are invariably linked,
Love it, love
and
it.
we still call them the New Jersey Red Bulls
And
because
you
we're
know
from
what?
New
We'll
Jersey
take
and
it.
we hate that they took our name out of the name.
We'll take it, man. I can absorb it. I can
I'll be
absorb
bitter for my entire life about that, just so you know.
it.
I grew up in Jersey going to Metro Stars games at Giant Stadium,
Yeah. Oh
when I was
man.
18 or 19 when the league finally started.
Yeah. Oh, that's
When they
crazy.
everyone's like, "Why aren't you a Red Bulls fan?" And I'm like, "Because they took New Jersey out of the name."
Yep.
You
And,
know,
and yeah, I think there are a lot of people who are like that who have kind of just begrudgingly kept it around. And we're like, okay, I guess I'll stick around because how long did we go without New York City around? So it's like there was no other team to support. So it's like,
yeah.
okay, I guess this is it.
Hey man, I understand logistics. I understand media centers and the size of populations and all that stuff. And if your team captain wants to go and do a national interview and say how he hated living in Hoboken and he had to go live in New York City, then that's fine. I won't hate Dax McCarty for his entire life because he said that about my home state. Whatever. It's not like I'm going
Uh,
to bring it up to him when I meet him in Atlanta before the cup in, what was that, 17, 18?
was
I
that it?
I did bring it up. Yeah. We
I'm
talked it
sure.
out. We're
I'm
good.
sure he loved that one.
We're good.
Good, man. Well, listen,
It was raining. There were like 3 people at his tent. So like we had a good long conversation.
yeah, well, we're going to need to schedule about 4 more conversations because I got so much more we need to talk about. But we're gonna end it here for today. I want to thank you so much for coming on and having this chat with us. Take this minute, 2 minutes, take however long as you want. Tell people where to find you, what you do, and all that good stuff.
So I'm on the Royal Riot Podcast. We're affiliated with ABC4 Utah. You can find us on socials. We're at Royal Riot Pod. Our podcast covers all things Real Salt Lake. Our sister podcast, same name, covers the Utah Royals. For right now, we are the only Royals podcast that does a weekly podcast just about the Royals. We have our own hosts that do that. And then I write for ABC4 on their website. I write their RSL. Usually I do the match previews, but you know, pinch me, I'm dreaming. I actually got to go down to Orlando and cover the US national team when Luna and Emeka were there.
Yeah.
And then because I wasn't going to let this go by without telling the story. If you were to ask me what my everlasting memory of 2024 for RSL would be, it's the clip that I sent you. It's Brian Vera picking up Daniel Shallowy after Shallowy dove in the box, just picked him up like a sack of potatoes, almost cursed there. Picked him up like a sack of potatoes, put him back on his feet. He got a yellow card, but I probably will never laugh so hard
Is
at something
that's
that I've
your
seen
that's your
in game.
your profile picture, isn't it? Him picking him up?
Yes,
Yes.
because RSL fans, well, RSL and Sporting Kansas City hate each other. So
Uh-huh.
I know
Yep.
you know that a lot of people find it surprising, but we have a long-standing hatred and dislike of each other. And all I'll say about that team is I remember when they were very CONCACAF-y back in, the mid 2000s, and I really loved the way they used to play. And now they have become such a bunch of floppers and criers and constantly just begging for calls that I think it's what happens when your coach just cries at the fourth official's ear for 90 minutes a match.
Oh,
I can't
Peter.
stand it. So when Shallowy, if you watch the entire clip I sent you, the reason I sent you the long clip is
Hmm.
because you can see him sticking his thumb in Vera's ribs and trying to get the reaction. And when Vera taps the back of his head as he goes by, he drops down holding his face as
Yeah.
floppers will. And Vera just wasn't having it. And he just picked him up and put him on it like a tantruming
Yes.
toddler, put him back on his feet. And then Eric Tommy ran over and tried to pretend that Vera hit him in the face, even though the referee was holding Vera's arms down by his side. And it was Tim Ford was the referee. It was Tim Ford's shoulder that Tommy ran into. And then he falls down and starts crying. So, yeah, it wasn't a smart thing to do. He was
No.
lucky that he got away with a yellow, but it was hilarious.
Yes.
And you need that over the course of a season.
Absolutely love it. Well, listen, I've already got August 10th bookmarked because you guys are traveling to New Jersey to play the New Jersey Red Bulls. I'll give it to you. So that will be a great time. Really looking forward to that. But thank you so much again for being here. Really enjoyed our conversation. I hope everybody else did too. And make sure you guys go follow them. They do really, really great in-depth reporting. Because remember, this is not so deep dives. They are the deep dive. Go there for the deep dive. So thank you guys so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. We'll see you next time on the next episode of the Designated Players and MLS podcast. See ya.
Thanks for having me.